ever since the 1970s, I think people have become more and more conscious of how food is a major factor in everything in their life, not only their weight, but also vascular health, mental health, and even just, there's already studies into how food affects your emotions and things like that. So it's a very interesting area.
How are you coping with all the heat here in Sydney at the moment?
Well, yes, lots of just doing very little. The house needs cleaning. I haven't got the motivation to do it because I don't have air conditioning.
No motivation, don't want to move. The less you move, the cooler you feel.
That's it.
But I thought we'd chat about food and diet because I think it's super important. And I feel like there's more awareness probably in the last couple of years, but more so this year. I feel like there's a lot of wellness trends that are focusing on diet and how food can really react with your hormones and just anything really, your metabolism, how it processes food. So I just thought it'd be really interesting to have a chat with you and get your take on how to better your life with food and how to work with a good diet to sort of get to feel better, basically.
So I think we touched upon this lightly in our last recording. You are what you eat. So from a Chinese medicine perspective anyway, energy or qi is actually derived from the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, the fluids that we consume, and it's all absorbed and it forms into qi through various organs, and that is circulated through the body. So it's a very major component in your energy, your mental health, your emotional health, everything, every part of your aspect of your life is affected by the food that we consume. And having said that, the ability to absorb the nutrients from the food is a major factor. There's a lot of people that eat the perfect diet, but without the organ systems which are able to absorb the nutrients, it's pretty useless. So we need to really tonify and regulate and keep working with our food and our bodies to absorb the nutrients.
What sort of ways can someone then work with their own body and food and how, because I know everyone responds differently to different types of foods, right? So, what can someone do to really fine tune that? And
everybody's different. So for instance, someone with a very strong digestive system can absorb nutrients from anything and probably produce what they need from everything within bounds. But if you have any of the following conditions, it might be suggestive that your digestive system isn't very strong. So if you bloat, if you have no appetite, if you're very fluidy, if you've just got no energy even though you're eating, these are all things. If you've got soft stools on a regular basis or diarrhea, if it goes between diarrhea and constipation, then there is definitely things that you can do to increase the absorption from food. Only work food, these are my suggestions. So, big thing is eat when you're hungry. We can overeat and that can slug down the digestive system and it can just slug down the whole body. The process of digestion actually takes a lot of energy. So if you're not hungry, it's a sign that you're not absorbing. So just give your body a break. Let it kind of recuperate. At some point, you will get hungry.
Yeah.
And when you start eating again, you might want to be a bit more careful with your choice of foods.
Right.
So what I say is fruits are very easy to be absorbed. They're high in fructose, which is an instant source of energy. It doesn't require a lot of processing. Things like, lamb and beef and fatty meats are one of the hardest things to digest. It requires a few more enzymes. It's hard to break down. Fat can be converted into energy, but it has to go through a different process, and that in itself can actually slug the system down. So there's a lot of people going into saying that they want to lose weight through a ketogenic diet, which you can lose a bit of weight. So how that works is by getting rid of all the sugars floating through the body, then the body starts to burn fat as a fuel. So that's the way of getting into your fat storage. But from a Chinese medicine perspective, a ketogenic diet can work, but it is also harsh on the liver and the kidneys. So there is a lot of byproducts from that. So even though there's a time and place for everything, there's certain people I wouldn't recommend a ketogenic diet to.
Right. Okay. And is that reflective of maybe some other symptoms that they have that you might identify with and think, oh, that's not going to work for you because of this reason, because you have this issue, and the keto won't work because your digestion still won't digest the food, or it won't work with those foods? Is that how you kind of determine it?
The motivating factor behind a lot of people going ketogenic is weight loss, or that they have a lot of issues with the digestions of grains and so on.
Right. Okay.
So they're the two most common reasons why people go ketogenic.
Okay.
Being ketogenic is very acidic in nature because you have a high consumption of animal protein.
I was just going to ask you that actually of what a day-to-day diet would be if you're on ketogenics.
So a ketogenic diet is very low in sugars of all forms and high in things like meats and dairies and cheeses, and also vegetables, any kind of vegetables, and low sugar fruits such as berries. So the aim, like I said, mainly to lose fat. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of people that have started studying seizures and a ketogenic diet, so it's to have some sort of effect in a positive light for people who have chronic seizures as well.
Really? I wonder, why would that be? Is that because it's a cleaner diet? It's less processed food? And
I'm not sure of the mechanisms itself, but definitely with certain groups medically, it's recommended.
Fats and sugars, they almost kind of go hand in hand together, don't they? Is there any truth behind that like excess fats can end up turning into sugars in your body? Are they related?
No, I think well, I mean, the fat you eat is the fat you really store, right? Okay, unless you're really using it straight away. If you have too much glucose, it gets converted to fat.
Right.
In fact, you'll find that a lot of people, as they get older, there's fatty liver is a big thing. Right. Where people are super saturated with sugars and it gets turned into fat. Food really influences everything about your life, and not just from a medical point of view, but also in your mood and even how, weight loss and hormone production as well. So
talk about that. That's really interesting. I don't think a lot of people realize that food can really impact on hormones.
So, I mean, I'll talk about one thing as an example, but there was a study, or there's been a few studies, and I wish I could quote them off the top of my head, but I don't really remember, so that's probably not great. But anyway, that looked at women with high dairy consumption, and then the incidence of things like PMS, menstrual cramp, floating estradiol in their body, which is a form of estrogen. Right. Also incidence of ovarian cancer. And I think that's it. I don't know if it extended beyond that. Can't remember if it was breast cancer, but I think it was breast cancer as well.
Yep.
And in the countries or in the groups that had a high dairy consumption in the West, this could be different in a Greek island where
yeah,
doing milk or
less
something
dairy.
like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, in the West, where we have consumer, what do you call it? Commercial farming.
Yes.
The incidence of all of these were much higher in women that had a regular consumption of dairy or dairy
Right.
products.
That's interesting.
So, I mean, anecdotally, I know that when I went off dairy, a lot of my issues also went as well with hormonal symptoms as well.
Yeah,
So
I can attest to that as well.
yeah. Oh, so you're dairy free?
Yeah, I've been dairy free for a while. I noticed that there were a few medical issues that I was dealing with back in 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
And I decided to cut dairy altogether. And I found that a lot of those medical issues started resolving themselves naturally.
Yeah.
That's, just to insert a disclaimer here for anybody, that doesn't mean that you can go out and just go and stop dairy if you think it's going to work for you. It's something that worked for me. It was a decision that I made personally, from my own research, a few conversations with a few nutritionists that sort of said, maybe you should really cut the dairy. And so I sort of took that path, and I found a massive improvement in the issues that I was dealing with at the time. A lot of them were cysts as well that I had in the breast, which I don't mind being open about. And they went away the moment I cut dairy. I had them drained twice.
Wow. Okay, so there were real issues for you, hey?
Real issues for me. They caused a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain. Thankfully, never cancerous. But they would always drain them and take it off for testing to make sure everything was okay. And they did it, especially when it was that time of the month, because your body is inflamed from the hormones, and those cysts would just almost like solidify in the breast. It caused a lot of discomfort for me, and that went away as soon as I stopped dairy. It just stopped. They haven't come back since, and that, like I said, that was back in 2010.
And isn't it interesting how, as babies, we're put straight onto cow's milk?
Well, that's an interesting topic in itself. I was allergic to cow's milk, which I think I mentioned in a previous video we did together. And I was raised on soy milk, and I've never really been a big dairy person. It was something I developed in my early 20s because I started loving coffee. Prior to that, I've never been a big cereal person. I was always your typical Aussie Vegemite on toast breakfast girl, which is not exactly the healthiest breakfast, but just to sort of give you background, it's not something that I was constantly intaking. And so a lot of those issues then didn't develop for me until I was an adult, because I was then introducing dairy myself into my own diet, not something my parents were doing. So it's interesting that you say you had a similar experience when you cut the dairy, where things started changing for you and getting a bit better for you as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people think that menstrual symptoms are just part and parcel of being a woman. I would personally disagree with that. I have worked with numerous women, and this is not a testimony, but I have worked with numerous women, and you can have periods where you don't even know it's coming.
Yeah.
In fact, I do believe that is what was intended naturally.
Yeah.
I think it's we're hormonally imbalanced. That's when we experience that. And it's interesting that it's considered normal to be hormonally imbalanced.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And even though, as I mentioned, I'm not in the medical profession of any sorts, I go off my own experiences. I 100% agree with you. I don't think it is normal, and it can be very frustrating for someone as an outsider like me in the past, where I've tried to work with people to try and find a resolution. And a lot of the times they just say, look, I just think it's one of those things, some women get period pains and some don't. And I always walk away and think, how is that even an answer?
Yeah.
How is that an answer?
Yeah.
Right?
It's I mean, were we so designed so poorly that, we kind of go from PMS to, all these menstrual issues.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, obviously most of the domestic animals are de-sex, but I don't know if in the wild, wild wolves, wild
Yeah,
horses
I don't think so.
have PMS.
Yeah, sure. I do think a lot of people sort of just brush it off and, like you said, just sort of accept it that, oh, you must just have hormone imbalances and that's it. And it does come down to food, because I know when I eat the wrong foods, Christmas, Easter, significant seasonal occasions where I may lose track of my healthy eating habits, I definitely have worse cycles, worse hormones. I feel stressed. I don't sleep well. And I know it all comes down to what I've eaten. It's as simple as that.
I absolutely agree with you. And I'll just mention that milk, before it was commercialized, was considered very yin in nature, which forms fluids
Really?
and moisture within the body.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, the idea of Chinese medicine is always to create balance.
Yeah.
So an excess of milk will create phlegm, and it will create masses, because phlegm coagulates to form things like cysts or fibroids or things like that. So, and interestingly, if you see somebody with, phlegm nodules or cysts or fibroids, you always work with the liver with them.
Identify those issues. One, how do you identify those issues? And two, how do you then work with your patient or your client to then sort of try and find a resolution for health improvement?
Usually with, that kind of thing, if it's a female, I'll always ask them about their menstrual health, because their menstrual health is like a report card that tells me so much about how their hormones are operating. So I'll ask them, do you experience PMS? Do you have period pain? Do you have clots in your blood? Have you been diagnosed with cysts or fibroids? That. Absolutely. And health, you can only offer recommendations, but working with the liver is key. And also you try to tell them to go on a diet that's a bit more lighter for the body, so it's not so taxed so heavily, which is always fruit and vegetables, because it's got fiber, and fiber is very good for cleaning out excess hormones, because it's used in this phase 2 detoxification of the liver. So the excess estrogen binds with the fiber and is taken out of the body through the stools. Absolutely.
Okay, that's really interesting.
But there are certain herbs as well that are good for moving the liver chi and moving masses and breaking it down as well.
Yeah, right. And so do you when you're prescribing those Chinese medicines, are they different depending on the patient and what needs treating?
Absolutely. That's the thing about Chinese medicine, and I'm sure it is with naturopathic medicines and other forms of holistic kind of medicines. You always treat the client as an individual. There is not one thing that you can market to them. You always need to look at the whole person, because even though you might have phlegm nodules, it might be because the kidneys don't have enough energy or something like that. It could be a secondary issue as a result of another issue.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So everyone is different, and you've got to treat them on a case by case, basically.
There definitely is a certain flavour of how you would treat it.
Yep.
But you always look at the person.
And on a personal note, when you are working with someone and you're giving diet recommendations, say, cut out dairy or do this or do that, do you find you get a pretty good response? Are people willing to sort of work on that holistic journey with you? And do you see those improvements?
Always about compliance. If people really stick to it. The hardest thing is to change someone's way of thinking.
Yeah, right.
Is what I find. People will, a lot of people would just want you to get rid of something so that they can keep operating. But every now and then you'll see somebody that's really dedicated and really invested in their own health and healing. And it's often with those kind of people that you see really good results. I think, having been in the business of healing for a while now, one thing that you really need to understand is to move out of your own ego about needing to heal somebody. I mean, you serve people at where they want to be served.
Right.
And if they are interested, then absolutely, that's great. It's really great to give inspiration or just to help them along the way, or just to provide little bits of information.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'd love to do that. In fact, that's why I'm actually doing these kind
Yeah.
of Zoom calls with you.
Oh.
Is because you want to put out information and inspire people and so on.
Yeah.
But it is partly ego as well. If a healer thinks that they can change people, it's not for us, because everyone's along their own journey. There's reasons why they can't break out of certain habits or whatever it is. But if they're really, really interested, they will.
They'll do it in their own time.
And it's about timing, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's always about timing. You got to do it in your own time. So we've touched base on so many things related to diet, because as we mentioned at the beginning, diet is just so important. What are your recommendations, to talk about diet and weight loss?
So obviously diet is absolutely critical if you're wanting to lose weight or wanting to at least trim down. Absolutely. So if you're gaining weight, which is actually quite common as people get older, what it is actually saying is there's some sort of stagnation in the body. And so wherever there's stagnation, it can accumulate, like either the fat accumulates or nodules accumulate or things like that. So whenever there's weight gain, once again, you look at the liver and its capacity to deal with things like excess hormones, excess toxins. All of these will slow the liver down. So if the liver's really working well and getting everything that it's needed, you'll find that you will metabolize the toxins out of your body. You will metabolize the excess hormones out of your body. That will in itself will help you lose weight. Just with a lot of people that are putting on weight, the one thing that I commonly see is that they're very deficient in qi and blood and kidney energy. So a lot of bigger people, overweight people, will be deficient and manifest as an excess of body weight.
Right, that's really interesting. So it can sometimes come down to the kidney as well, not just the liver, but also the kidney.
Absolutely. And just the process of creating energy in the body. So it's like they have no energy in the body. So if you think of a river, everything just accumulates because you can't push it through. Yep. So there's just accumulation and accumulation. And once you have fatty tissue in your body, that in itself creates more things like hormones. So it is kind of like a problem that accumulates and becomes worse if it's not addressed initially.
Right, okay. And that's something that you can work with your Chinese medicine. You can sort of help. Do you help stimulate that? Is there a way to stimulate it?
Absolutely. Yep. But there's so much you can do on your own as well. Yeah. The other thing is stress. So if people are chronically stressed, you're going to be in a fight or flight mode, and that will make you accumulate fat. So making sure that people are relaxed and energized is so important to things like weight loss.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to note about stress and weight loss. I feel like that's a common thing when people are very highly stressed out, because a lot of the times they'll either not eat or they'll eat too much because they're in times of constant stress, and both of those don't work in their favor. You go.
So if you're in constant stress, you're not actually absorbing what you're eating. Whatever you don't absorb becomes a toxin to your body, right? The body just packs it in and it says, I'll deal with it later. So you're not actually getting the most out of your food. So people that, they might be on their devices as they're eating. It's true, that when you come into a calm space, you calm your mind down, which is unfortunately one of the things about modern society that we see less and less of, is our mind is always doing things, and it doesn't actually go into that lower brainwave frequency as often, where it can relax and process things.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing that you just touched on too, rest. I think it's underestimated that rest is also the key to weight loss, like you said, because if you're not if you're not in that perfect state, then like you said, your body's just wasting energy. It's wasting everything. It's not doing what it needs to do in order to function properly.
And just to let you know, people will be sleeping, but it's the quality of the sleep that's really important to get into rejuvenation.
Right.
If you're light sleeping, your body is actually never recovering. You're never creating that energy that it requires for healing. You have to get into the lower brainwave frequencies in order to do that. So there's beta, which is what we consciously, when in our waking state, and then you go into alpha, beta, and delta. So when that's in deep sleep, so you really want to be making sure that you get into those deeper levels of sleep